Alrighty, so this is week 7 attendance, and I'm running a little bit late. Today is Saturday. I normally do attendance on Friday. This week that just passed, week 6, our first dev deadline was, of course, due. And I've seen at this point about, I think, a handful of you, not quite half of you. So next week, right, I'll see the other half. And I thought what I would do is what I always like to say is part of why I enjoy this is that I challenge myself to write code, not just you. And so for me, this semester, because, and you may have heard me say this, I actually had created the course that you're doing right now, the setup, the videos. I did it last semester for the first time. I've been able to allow this first 6 weeks of content to really be what I'd created last semester, but I really try to challenge myself to continue to write code in whatever language you're taking, in this case, Python, mostly because I want to remind myself of what it's like. Because and this is probably not a great analogy, so just know that it's the best I have. Because I've been writing only JavaScript really for this semester. Switching today to Python to write my new version. What you saw for week 6 attendance was actually my last semester version of a Dev Zero program. And again, it's not that that's what students had to write, it's just what I wrote in that case. So I decided today to actually sit down and write the thing, something new. Now, what I base this off of is what I've been doing in my JavaScript class as far as the concept. Something that's really important to me right now, which is the cost of charging an EV, electric vehicle. So, what was so good was the moment of like frustration that I remember, like, oh yeah, how does this work? Oh yeah, how does this work? So it's a very common thing to Google things. Very common, right? Matter of fact, without it, often the joke I've heard, it's like that's really all programmers do. I wouldn't say that's true. What it is you have to have enough knowledge for what to search for to find those references. And in that process, and I'm going to show you my code here in a minute, and I'm going to talk about a few of the things I've already seen in the dev work this week. But one of the things I was just checking to make sure I was recording. Um, what was I saying? I lost my train of thought. There goes the train. Anyway, um, I think what it was good, why it was good for me is like, it feels like starting not from the beginning, because once you have enough experience, you know what to search for. And when you're like I was trying to remember, and I'll show you, I wanted to do validation with a try, of course, but I also wanted to do a while, so it loops through doing that. And I looked around for kind of some of the best practices of ways to do that, knowing that ultimately what we're doing here, which is running command line apps, is not what you do typically from, you're writing apps so that somebody's going to use that. They're not going to run command line unless you're running scripts, and then maybe they are, right? So it's not totally not modern practice. And it's good experience to know how to do that. So I reviewed the requirements, and I'm like, yeah, I got all that. I definitely got all that. Um, and it was fun. I guess that was the other thing. It's like, it is fun when you can get it to work. It did take me longer than I thought it would. Like, I was like, I'd planned probably having this out a couple hours ago, but I ended up just playing around and, it's like, how would I do this? How would I do that? But again, I do it to remind myself first. That way, when you're talking about issues that you have with Python, hopefully my brain will be a little more current, because it really is amazing. And here's part of what I hope you take away from this. It really is good to code every day if you can in some way, or at least, I mean, for this class, minimum 2 times a week, right? But the more you code, the more you start to think, because, and I've said this to my JavaScript class, so I'll say it here. You have to think like Python, right? Think like Python wants you. And now Python is not as demanding as some other languages, right? It's a little more flexible. And I've been thinking like JavaScript for the past 6 weeks, so I had to put my Python brain back on and my new blinders of trying to remember how I want to write things. And the challenge I gave myself was I didn't want to look at what I had done before. I wanted to do something new, because that's part of what I'm challenging you all to do in this class, is actually try to come up with a concept and code that concept, not without looking. For me, the reason I didn't look at what I've done before is I didn't want to do that approach. I wanted to have a clear new eye approach to it. So anyway, it's a lot of information, but I just wanted to give you that. So, and in the process, that's where I was heading a minute ago when the train left. Was that, I want to say this, is that the Automate the Boring Stuff website is really good. I actually was just doing some Googling, and I found, right? I found some things in here just through the process of Googling that I was looking for. It was, I had to remind myself about validation, right? And it was good. I ended up writing a little different validation that was here, but I got to remind myself of the, uh, you know, really good approach of a while statement. And many of you that I've already seen have done this. So anyway, so one of the first things I want to say, because I've already seen a couple of students do this, so I want to remind you, if you haven't seen this, right? When you're going to run your code now, I've noticed a couple of you run your code this way, which is just run without debugging. And then some of you do what I've been doing, which is running it on the command line. And I just want to remind you, a really easy way to get to that current directory is to right click either on the folder or on the file and hit open in integrated terminal. Just if you're going to run it that way. But starting soon, and I think probably very soon, I'll start talking about, and he talks about it too. He talks about debugging really from the command line, running the code as he's doing, right, in idle. But in the case of what I'm going to have you do is really talking about doing it from VS Code. So the sooner you learn how to run this, because I used it a little bit today to try to troubleshoot some of my code, right? But just in general, before I kind of, and again, you can tell me if you want to look at this example. But like one of the really, and I think this is good practice, is to have an initialization function that kind of handles, right, my whole program interface, like my user interface here. So I have everything kind of in one function. It's going to call, of course, other functions. It's going to have a while user input in, which was I thought a good way to do this. It just beats doing, I'm going to still do a try except in some of my function here, but it was just a really easy, quick, to me, clear way to do that. But as an example, if I wanted to set a breakpoint and watch my code step by step, I could set a breakpoint by clicking here, right? And then I would hit run and I would start debugging. It's going to ask for the current file. Okay, and then it's stopping right here. And then what's great about this, right, is that I can I can see, it's out. I got to give it input, right? It's like, why is it stopped? Because it's actually waiting for me to do something. And then if I step into this, right, I can see if I just use my mouse, I can scroll over the line before that was executed to see what now is stored in user input. Okay, I can see by stepping into. You can also step out of this function, but most of the time in the beginning, what you're doing is stepping into. So now I'm calling this function. And this is where, right, I did input. I gave a message of, was I charging at home, supercharging, or am I done? And so stepping into here, now it's asking, of course, for that. And let's just say supercharging for S, right? And then I did that while loc, right? That variable, that local variable here, not in, right? So in other words, they gave me an input that was not what I required. And I also accommodated for upper and lower case here, right? So, so now I'm still running, right? So I'm checking that. And in this case, it was within that. If it wasn't, I would throw the, I had asked them again for the input. I would throw the exception. I'd say try again. When I was first writing this, it seemed like, God, it feels like repeat it. And, you know, the one edict in programming we talk about oftentimes is don't repeat yourself. But when you're writing this type of validations loop, you have to at least give the first message and get the input and then run the while loop in there. And it just, again, I like the way it was felt cleaner. And then we'll return that value here. So again, I would challenge you now to see if you can at least stop your code, you know, understand how to stop it, putting in VS Code this breakpoint, which is that red point, right? Running your debugger and then walking through your code is a good place for you to be right now. Now, if I want to stop it here, I can, because now I just want to actually run the code. And again, I'm going to come over here. Now, by the way, once you do that, it's in the Python console. You can just come up to bash for me, because I am one. And I, again, notice some of you like me like to run it from the command line. Some of you like to run it from here. It doesn't really matter. But the key is this again, open in integrated terminal. So I'll just show you. I think I have it in my cache. I don't. And I'm using that up arrow to see what commands had been in my history in there. And I think because I had switched to a new bash, I lost some of that history from before. So I'm just going to run my py. So I'm going to track my. So I gave some output to the user. Yes, I want to. Yes, I want to enter. Right, I'm going to enter supercharger, how many miles, and I ended up doing a calculation of how many miles remaining. I'm definitely going to work on this content because, again, I'm going to see the difference between doing this in Python and in the browser and doing it here as we move through the course. But for now, all I did was look at how many miles remaining in the battery charge. So if I come home with, let's say, 50 miles on the battery, right, the cost is $18 if I'm charging at a supercharger, because in that case, the battery can charge up to 270. And that's the other thing, is actually giving the user the input, because typically at a supercharger, you wouldn't charge all the way up. But I kind of simplified, and that's one of the things you really sometimes do on a first run is simplify your inputs. So now I'll do a home, right? And let's say I came home with 50 miles. So now I have the cost of that one. And if I hit done, then I get the charging costs at home and the charging costs at a supercharger. Okay. So that's what I wanted to show you. Next week, so starting in week 7, we start our next thing. And the thing I said, and I know this is probably a little longer than normal. So the thing I want you to think about, I said this to a couple of you, but I just want to say it collectively, is I want you to think about if you're going to take what you've started here into your next dev 1, right? So we have dev 0, dev 1, and dev 2. And dev 1, that will be now what we've learned, right? A lot of what we'll be doing here, and this is handling files, writing to files, versus like in this case, because it's not storing this data anywhere, we're just, it's not persistent. So we'll make this data input persistent. We'll also learn how to write more complex data structures, meaning data dictionaries. That's really important. We in JavaScript we call these objects or an array of objects, right? So you can combine these two major primitives that you're learning, data dictionaries and lists together, but also just understanding how to write persistent data, whichever way you do it, and then how to summarize that. So what I will do probably next week is just kind of show you, here's the requirements for Dev 1. And the reason I'm doing that now is so that you can keep that in mind, and make a decision. I'm fine either way. Just probably communicate with me would be good. Is if you're going to change your topic, just talk to me about it, right? Talk to me about what you think you'll end up doing. So anyway, that's it. The only other thing I want to say, and I promise this is the last one, is that one thing I will change about Dev 1, because this happened to a couple of people, was they didn't see my email for the signups, so they were late in that process. So in addition to emailing it, which I think caught most of you, I will post that into the Discord. So I think most of you are on Discord, which is awesome. But if you aren't, now's the time. You can go back to week 1 to see that, how to get on that. So anyway, have a great rest of whenever you watch this. I said that, but now I want to go look just so I think we're looking at in week 6. Let's see, our Learn Together. Oh, that's 7. I meant 7. Let's see what 7 is. I looked at it earlier and I just don't remember right off the top of my head. Right. Oh yeah, data dictionaries. That's what I was talking about before, right? This is good. This is perfect. This is what I was talking about. And again, if you've had any JavaScript, we call these objects. So this is the other major primitive in any programming language, is a list of some type, and a way to store a data dictionary, right? Again, each programming language may refer to those things differently, but it's a data structure that is very common, and you want to learn how to do that. Okay. All right. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you later.